Okay, this is a tutorial extension for the DCA tool where I've added new functionality that I want to share. So what you'll see now is this master tab. And this master right now is empty. It only has the skeleton, but it will be populated as we create new forecast scenarios. So let's create a couple of them. If we go back to the DCA tool, let's just use this as is. And as you know, once you've done your match, you go to the go to summary. It brings you to this tab. You can run the summary to update these tables. And then you have this little box here when you name your forecast scenario and you give it a name, forecast 1, forecast 2, forecast low, whatever name you want to assign to it. You save the scenario and a new tab will be created with that scenario we just created. So now this tab contains only numbers, no formulas. Okay, and let's create another one just so you can see what this new functionality is. Let's just change, just for the sake of this example, let's do something like that. Okay, it doesn't matter that it's not much. So you will see a different type of forecast. Okay, so go to summary. We update this summary tab once more, and we're gonna to name that forecast 2. Okay, and we're gonna save that scenario. Now we have tabs scenario 1 and scenario 2 with the two forecasts. Now the new tab that I just added, master tab, will have now this a table with all the forecasts we've created, and this is all about comparing those different forecast scenarios. Now if you do know Power Query, pivot tables and pivot charts, this will be very logical for you, but if you don't know about this, it doesn't really matter. You just need to follow a sequence in which the first step is to create a data model. So we're just going to run this macro by hitting on that button. And after that, we're going to create a chart of the data stored in the data model, which is essentially a table that lives in memory. Now, just for the sake of observing whether that table has been created, you don't need to, but you can go here to the data, queries and connection, and it'll show you that a master table has been created. And now we can use that table that lives in memory to create a chart. So we're going to create a chart that has date and rate. And then we create the chart. There you go. Now you can close that pane. You don't need it. So this is a pivot chart which has been created off of the data living in that data model. Now again, if you're familiar with this is a pivot chart. You can just click on this to see the fields on the right. You can display or not the buttons on the chart itself, show axis field, things like that. But again, you don't need to do any of this if you're not familiar with this. That's fine. Just need to understand that you follow this sequence first. We create a data model, then we create a chart, and then every time we bring a new scenario, you just need to refresh that data model to update this with the third scenario. For example, let's go back here. Let's create yet a third scenario. Let's just change this once again. Let's do that. And that's it. Run the summary to update these tables. And let's just name that 3. And the forecast is going to be forecast 3. The name you assign to it doesn't really matter. We say that third scenario, it's there. So we go back to the master, and all we need to do is to refresh this because we had already created it in the previous step. So now I just need to refresh the data model and the chart refreshes automatically. Okay. Now you can see here the 3 forecasts being compared on the same chart. So it's just essentially a way to speed up your scenario comparison. Now you have this utility here where you can display either rate or cum. Again, so you update the chart. Now it's cumulative production or rate. Okay. And this one can be either dates or it can be elapsed time. Okay, so you have this utility to quickly compare on a chart all the scenarios you've created and saved. So going back to the previous version, you have this dashboard where you actually do conduct your DCA, create your forecast. The summary table is what allows you to see all the parameters of your historical match and your forecast. And then we save the scenario to create these tabs, which contain now only numbers. And finally, the new functionality that I've added in this version is this master tab, where you have the ability to visually compare all the forecasts you've created, display them in this chart as a function of elapsed time or dates, and you can display rates or cum. And also you have visually here the table itself with all the forecasts. In this case, scenario 1 all the way to scenario 3. Now, I also added this little table to the right and some commentary there. You can read on your own time for further reference. But this table here, you can actually delete scenarios. So what this is going to do is going to run a macro, is going to delete the scenario from this table, from the data model, which is the table that lives in memory, and it's going to delete the tab. Okay, so for example, let's delete scenarios 2 and 3. So we're going to do 1 for yes delete. And after that, you just run the macro, and this is going to be deleting all the rows in the table that belong to the scenarios you selected. So it's going to tell you here the status, it's deleting. You just simply need to wait until this is done. And after that, the tabs you see here for those two scenarios would have disappeared. The rows belonging to those two scenarios would have disappeared here and also in the data model that lives in memory. So you can recreate new forecast scenarios and not fill up your workbook with unnecessary or redundant tabs. Okay, it's complete, as you can see. The chart now only has scenario 1. The table itself got now updated. It only has scenario 1, the only remaining scenario in the workbook. The table itself now here has only scenario 1, nothing else below it. And the tabs for scenario 2 and 3 disappeared. Now, if we go and see that table in the queries and connections pane, you can see now it's only 235 rows, which are the same ones that we can see here. Okay, 235 rows. Okay, that's it. Just for the sake of showing this once again, let's create a new scenario. Let's save that once again, the same one without, okay, let's do one little tweak. Actually, let me show you this. If you create a little gap here, forecast starts, let's create a little time gap. See here, create some space there. And now that is the one we want to save. Run summary. I'm going to save that as scenario 2 with a gap, save scenario. Okay, and now in the master tab, I'm going to refresh my data model to bring the new scenario that I just created. Okay, and here you go. What I wanted to show you, when you do have a time gap, which is one of the comments here, when different scenarios have different start dates, gap in forecast, only use elapsed as x-axis, not date, as a scatter chart is not possible in Excel when using pivot charts. What does this mean is here, they all look good. So I have the two forecasts I created when shown with the x-axis as elapsed time, it's fine. But when I change this to date, it doesn't work. You have this massive gap here because this is not a scatter chart. This is a line chart. So this puts one series after the other one. So this is just a limitation of the pivot chart utility in Excel that doesn't allow for scatter charts. So just be mindful of when you do have different start dates, this chart is not going to allow you to have dates here. You have to have elapsed time. But obviously you can create your own. The table is here. But the pivot chart itself is not going to work, and you need to be aware of that.